So we've got the assembly of the motor done. Now one of the biggest worries that everybody has is oil priming the motor so that when you first start it up, you don't run the bearings dry. The Datsun has a way of doing this with drill. I'm going to show you how to do that. So first, we're just going to pull the distributor back out since it's just sitting there anyway. And the way this car is designed, this is the old seal, which I'm going to replace with a new one. So I can just pop this one out without worrying about it, because I haven't put the new one in yet. With this seal out of the way, I can reach in here with a screwdriver and remove the worm gear that drives the oil pump and the distributor with the distributor drive rod. Now with that gear out of the way, I can take the distributor drive rod and dun-dun-dun, with our new oil pump, and its new gasket, and there's a mark. So when you install this thing, you're supposed to line up this mark and this mark as you insert this whole thing into the block. I'm not too critical right now because I don't even have the worm gear in there. So we're just gonna put it in for the purposes of getting the engine primed. Now, before I stick this in though, I wanna fill the oil pump up with oil so I don't run it dry either, which is a real simple task, I hope. And since I'm just using this oil to prime and clean the motor, I'm only going to run it, a little while, and then I'm going to change the oil anyway. I'm just using 30 weight, the cheapest oil I can find. I can throw a little oil in here. And I can put it in the suction side and the pump side. Oh, like that. That worked around in there. Wait, a little too much. We're now going to insert the pump into the motor very carefully. Oop. Trying not to hit. So I don't need to torque these or anything because again, I'm just putting this on for the purpose of priming the engine. I'm gonna pull this back off and get everything timed right. Get the new seal in. This is just basically how to prime a motor. Okay, so the pump is on. Now, I've made a special tool that I can stick down in the hole, and voila! Because I'm not connected to the crankshaft here, I can rotate this without the motor rotating and pump oil throughout the motor. Now, first I have to put motor in the oil to pump around. So let's do that.
You mean you have to put oil into the motor?
Yeah. I don't have any motor in the oil. I don't have any oil. Wait, what did I say? First, I have to put oil in the motor to pump it around. as you can see in there, there's the top of the distributor rod. It has an offset pin or cam, and if you can look in there, I have slotted a rod that matches that offset, and then I put this rubber boot around it to hold it in place while I rotate it. So let's see what happens. Oh. Okay. I turned it the wrong way. Okay, so now scan across here if you can. Can you see the oil?
I can see it moving.
Okay, can you see the oil running out on all my... What the heck? Stay on there.
Where's it going?
It just drains. It's draining back into the head and draining back into the thing. I just wanted to make sure that all my little oil guys are splashing oil like they're supposed to. This Datsun has an oil rail on the valves. And I can assume, since I have pressure up here, that my bearings down below are getting all pressured. These are getting pressure in here. The drill has become hard to turn, which means I have oil pressure. So basically, because I have good flow streams over all my cams, oops, sorry, it came off. I know I'm getting oil pressure to my crank. Everything's getting bled out. And if you look on the floor over here, you can see that I'm getting oil out of my rear bearing on my crank because the seal isn't there. That pretty much means that my block, as all the air bubbles are pumped out of it, I've got good clear flow. So when I start this baby up, it's not going to take a while for that pump to get the oil through the system. It's going to be right there. So it's going to be more like an oil change. Maybe. Okay, so now that I got the engine primed, I'm going to take the pump back off and we're going to put it back together with all the timing done right. So, since I filled the engine up with oil, I'm going to lose a little bit here. So, we will catch as much as we can. Four bolts. There it is. Okay. There. Alright, so now I gotta take the worm drive, slide it back in, back into its slot. So, then I'm gonna slide the pump back in. As you're inserting that pump and you're inserting the rod in, it's going to twist on you as it hits that gear. And you want this thing to be 5 degrees. So if you draw a line between here, the center of this hole, and the center of this hole, you want the cam underneath to be 5 degrees off of that. Now, basically what that comes down to is if it's off, if you're off this way, you're correct. If you're off this way, then you're wrong. Or if you're too far this way, you only have so many positions it'll lock into on that lower cam gear. So it just needs to be not lined up with these two holes and cocked clockwise from that. Then you know your timing is good. Let's put in the distributor. And see if we can get it to lock into place. And it'll only go in one way because again that tab is offset, so you can't get it. Now this distributor has been upgraded to an electronic ignition, so there's no points. But on the other side of that, I don't have my rotor right now. Let's see if it's pointed at number 1. So I guess I should have mentioned that the crank needs to be in top dead center, number 1, in order for that timing to work. So on to the valve job. All I can say is patience, patience, patience. Now the first time I did a valve job on this motor was when it was in the car, and granted, leaning over the car to get to the head in the car is really a pain and made it really hard. So this actually went really easy and really fast. So basically all you have to do is make sure the lobe is pointed straight up, stick the gauge in between the rocker arm and the cam, and then you have your adjusting bolt on the spark plug side of the rocker. You have the bolt that actually adjusts the gap, and then you have its jam nut that holds it in place. So I just went through and rotated it to each position, got the feeler gauge out. The exhaust and intakes are of course different gap, and it's always been a good rule of thumb with my motors that I adjust to the loose side. If you're gonna make a mistake or if you're gonna be sloppy about it, always go loose on the valves. You might hear them ticking underneath the valve cover when it's running, but that's better than them not ticking and the valve not being allowed to close fully, which of course would burn out a valve and you would lose compression pretty quick. So if you're gonna err and not get it perfect because you're impatient, just err on the loose side. You might hear a little ticking, but at least you know that valve's closing when you go to fire that thing off. So this is the first valve job on this motor, being completely rebuilt. In about 500 miles or so, I'm going to want to do another one just to check things out and make sure everything is set in real nice. Let the aluminum head expand and retract from heat a couple times, and it should be good to go. Now this doesn't have rods or anything. The cam is up there. It's a single overhead cam, so you don't have to worry about any of that. So the likelihood of it getting out of adjustment isn't very likely, but it's just a good idea to check it. And to check it roughly throughout the life of the motor, especially if you start hearing ticking a little bit louder or the motor starts losing compression. But yeah, just be patient with it. Go over it several times. It should be good to go. So that's it for this video. Next video, I'm probably going to do a little bit of work on the carburetors, maybe a modification or two. Try and get a little bit more air into the motor. Hopefully I can get the front balancer turned down and on the machine, or on the block. And maybe do some work inside the engine bay, getting ready for the installation of the motor. So until next time, thanks for watching.